Warning, hot takes ahead.
Hot stuff coming through.
Because we are ranking the albums of Children of Bodom. And this is also airing on the 20th anniversary of Hate Crew Deathroll, but as always, we're starting at the beginning with Something Wild in 1997. Very solid album overall, especially for a debut. The riffs already really stand out, especially on tracks like Lake Bodom. I've always described this band as kind of like, this is what happens when somebody who idolizes hair metal musicians forms a melodic death metal band. Very different from stuff like Dark Tranquillity and In Flames. Like, these guys were kind of like shredding and thrashing it up, living that rock star lifestyle. I also dig the more symphonic moments like The Nail. Really great energy all the way through, and it is definitely one that has grown on me since I first heard it. The only thing that pulls it down a bit for me are some pretty questionable Yarly clean vocals that range from unpleasant to downright terrible. Otherwise great, even if it's not personally one of my favorites, so potential hot take number one, I'm putting this one at B tier. I know a lot of people would probably put it higher than that, but this is my opinion.
I openly admit that what I'm about to say is blasphemous.
But let's move on to Hatebreeder in 1999. And I'd say this one carries over everything that was already great about the debut. Killer riffs, synth is on point, Warheart is a fantastic opener of many. Love that little bass solo on top of everything else. The title track has got those heavy metal hooks, and I love those big pounding drums on Wraith Within. Children of Bodom is just brimming with riffage, and I love the little gang vocal moments. Unfortunately, they still have not ditched those Yarly clean vocals, which still just really suck. It just brings everything down, especially on No Commands, which is just a big turnoff for me. I'm also on the fence. Sometimes I feel like maybe the songs aren't quite as consistent overall as the debut, but I know this is a big fan favorite. It's just not a start to finish jam for me. There are albums in their discography I enjoy more, so I'm sorry, but I'm also putting this one in B tier. If you like it more, by all means, let me know in the comments why your thoughts differ from mine. I always find it really interesting when people actually share something that gives me a broader understanding of different perspectives than my own. It's more fun when we disagree, in my opinion. Anyways, let's go on to Follow the Reaper in 2000. Now, I'd say that this one vastly improves on everything from the first two albums, with even stronger standouts in here like Bodom After Midnight, Children of Decadence, and Mask of Sanity. Tracks like Every Time I Die feel more epic than ever before, the production is stepped up, crazier riffs, shreddier solos, synthier synths. They were pulling in more influences from symphonic and power metal at this point, and I also think it's a more consistent listen with fewer vocal issues to take me out of it. So take those first two albums, blend them up, take all the best elements, filter out the things that I don't like as much, and you basically get this album. So I'm putting this one at A tier. It's still not tip-top for me. I know a lot of fanboys would put this at S, but again, I like to spread out the releases across all 5 tiers to fully differentiate. I think it makes for a more interesting video, and frankly, again, there are albums that I just think are even better than this one. Speaking of which, time to talk about Hate Crew Deathroll, 20 years old at the time of this airing, originally released in 2003. One of my personal favorite Children of Bodom albums. This is where they take all the elements they've been working on and pretty much perfect them. The hooks are even stronger, the vocals are more anthemic, and the solos are as insane as ever. Needled 24/7 is an awesome opener and like a top 10 track for the band. I'd say it's like 75% hooks. This then followed closely by the slower, more groovy, but no less infectious 6-pounder. Bodom Beats Terror is another headbanger with great synth work to complement the start-stop riffing. And speaking of which, gotta love that waterfall-like synth hook on the title track. Lil Blood Red Riding Hood is also fun despite the corny title. Also, it hit number 1 on the Finnish album charts and stayed there for 2 weeks. And the video for Needled 24/7 got them some new mainstream exposure. It's also the last album to be recorded with all 5 original members, some rougher vocals here and there, and Angels Don't Cry is a little bit lame, but otherwise, for me, this is an easy S tier.
Acceptable.
Then they followed that up with Are You Dead Yet in 2005. Now, depending on who I talk to, this is sometimes a hot take, but through the channel, I see more people are becoming based and recognizing that this is one of their best albums. I know some people hate on it, but man, it's just a great time. Living Deadbeat is my favorite of their album openers, which is a tall order considering, again, they have a lot of great ones. I'd even put this song up there with some of the best melodic death metal album openers overall, alongside like Soilworks, Follow the Hollow, and Arch Enemy's Enemy Within. The title track's main hook is super infectious with that little harmonic, and the vocals are extremely catchy. That thrashy intro to If You Want Peace, Prepare for War is pure hype. Love the little bass and drum breaks throughout as well. I think the only track I'm not a huge fan of is Punch Me, I Bleed, but even that's not terrible. Other than that, really solid runtime. I'd say it's just short of S, but I'm gonna put it at A tier. Underrated and sometimes overhated.
Why do you hate fun?
And then we got Blooddrunk in 2008. Hellhounds on My Trail is another killer opener, maybe like my number 2 favorite. Sick melodeath riffs, enthralling D-beats, super dramatic synths, and even some gang vocals for good measure. Great title track too, with more of a folky kind of calma energy to it. And really there's a few tracks on here kind of combining those two energies, like Lobotomy. Love the synth intro to One Day You Will Cry, which feels almost like Christmassy in a weird way. I mean, maybe somebody out there knows what I'm talking about. Then you've got the awesome 8-bit sounding one on Tie My Rope, which is another top 10 track for me. Plenty of killer soloing, great extended one on Smile Pretty for the Devil. Solid vocal performance too from Alexi, and an even more consistent and tight runtime, I think, overall. If you ask me, I think that this might be their best album overall, which, again, seems like it might be a hot take. Like, I was shocked looking at the Metal Storm fan rankings for these, and I tend to put more weight on those than any other site because it's a group grade instead of just one person saying it. But look at these, like, they're pretty much a complete flip from my own opinion, and this is a low ranked album on there, but I just think it's fantastic.
Ooh, you smell that? It smells like someone's wrong, and it's not me.
S tier, easy for me. But they followed that up with Relentless, Reckless Forever in 2011. I think this album is good, but it's lacking in a lot of the same magic. It's hard to put my finger on exactly why a song like Round Trip to Hell and Back, and even the title track, feels like something is missing. There are still some solid moments though. Pussyfoot Miss Suicide, despite the kind of cringe name, has a fun sort of rock and roll swagger to it. Ugly kind of mixes thrashy riffs with more melodic stuff. Not My Funeral is a decent opener. Love the bass on Shovel Knockout too. Honestly, I wouldn't say there are any standout bad tracks, just some less memorable ones. I do appreciate again too the tighter, shorter runtime, which is true for most of this discography, but it makes for a swift listen regardless. Not great, not terrible. I'm putting this one at C tier.
It was not what I wanted!
Then there's Halo of Blood in 2013. Now, unfortunately, this continues with that same trajectory into sort of meh territory. Again, not terrible, but just pretty boring and forgettable by comparison. Nothing really grabs me, and it just lacks the same energy and vitality, even if there are still some solid riffs to be found. Highlights here, I would say Transference, Bodom Blue Moon, One Bottle, and a knee-deep Waste If Skin. I will say Dead Man's Hand on You was a mistake. It's like a Dark Tranquility track, but without a strong, clean vocalist like Stan. Definitely among their weakest, but not their weakest. Still C tier for this one. Getting down to the final two here, we have I Worship Chaos in 2015. This is the first album without Rupe Latvala, and it was recorded in a warehouse instead of a studio. Still some great guitar work, which is really true of every album, but just lacking in, again, the same level of songwriting. Many of these songs even feel meandering and directionless at this point, unfortunately. I think Morrigan and I Worship Chaos are half-baked and very repetitive, and Alexi also falling back into some of his worst vocal habits that he had seemingly worked so hard to abandon at this point. I don't know if that had anything to do with his addiction production catching up with him or if it was just a choice. But I'd say this is especially apparent on slower tracks like Prayer for the Afflicted and All for Nothing. And even the better tracks like Horns, despite ramping things up again, feel kind of like lesser retreads of better past material. No disrespect, but if I'm just being totally honest to my own feelings, this album is actually kind of bad, I would say. This is the first time I would say like it's sort of a bad album.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
It feels like I'm listening to a less talented band trying to sort of cover Children of Bodom songs. So this one going to D tier. Plenty of albums way worse than this that I would choose this over in a second, but just not great. And then finally we have Hexed in 2019. Their final album, after which basically everyone would quit and things would unfortunately get nasty legally around the band name. Alexi went on to form Bodom after midnight, but would sadly pass away just months later. Rest in peace to a major talent.
The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long.
As such, I imagine the recording of this album must have been kind of a fucking nightmare, and unfortunately I'd say it shows. As with I Worship Chaos, everything just again feels half-baked. It's not nearly as grand sounding, with the keys feeling pulled back, and overall the production is kind of flat and thin. Of course the solos are still there, but it's not in the name of songs that already stand strong without them. Like, strip away the solos from any of like their earlier material and you've still got a fantastic song, and that's just not the case here. I will say I kind of like Under Grass and Clover with its more upbeat, kind of equilibrium sounding melodies. It's one of the few things that actually stands out here. Kick in the Spleen also has its moments, and Hexed has some fun neoclassical sounding elements. But outside of that, I'm already ready to shut things off. Basically, like, by the time I get into the third track, I'm just ready to put on one of their better albums. So, again, one of their worst for me, possibly the worst. Let me know down in the comments again what you think. But yeah, D tier for this one. But y'all, you can check out this playlist for plenty more melodic death metal related rankings. And again, let me know down in the comments, how would you rank things differently? It's okay to disagree. It's more fun that way. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.